Tonight, 1 Kings chapter number 22. 1 Kings chapter number 22. Joe Louis was the heavyweight world boxing champion in 1937 until he retired in 1949. In 1946, Louis prepared to defend his title against a very skilled fighter by the name of Billy Conn. Louis was warned to watch out for Conn's great speed and his tactic of darting into attack and then moving out of his opponent's range. In a famous display of confidence, Louis replied, "He can run, but he can't hide." There are many people who live their life as if they can run from the consequences of their actions. They can disguise themselves and evade the reaping of what they've been sowing. Truthfully, I think even we sometimes believe that our sins are hidden, that our gossip will never be discovered, the pornography will never be found out, the bitterness will never be known. We foolishly believe that we can sin, conceal it, hide it, and get by with it, and that we can disguise our sin in ourselves and avoid the consequences of it. That was exactly Ahab's thinking as he was determined to go into battle with Syria. It was in direct rebellion against Micaiah's warning. Like so many, Ahab thought that he could conceal himself, evade the providence of God's hand, but he is going to discover that we will be reminded tonight that what we conceal is not hidden from God. We may conceal it from people. We may conceal it from even those that are close to us. But my friend, you don't hide anything from God. You can run, but you can't hide. And God sees all, and God knows all, and God knows where we are. And we're going to find the arrow of God's judgment has our name on it, and will find us no matter how much and how good we are concealed. Look with me here in 1 Kings chapter number 22. We're going to start down in verse number 28. And Micaiah said, "If thou return it all in peace, the Lord hath not spoken by me." And he said, "Hearken, O people, every one of you." We stopped there last week. Micaiah is giving warning. He is warning Ahab, if you go into battle, you are going to die. Israel is going to be left leaderless. And you are not going to come out of this alive. Notice, though, in verse number 29. So, you just heard you're going to die. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. Going to go to battle anyway. Going to do it anyway. What I see here is a very determined sinner. A determined sinner. And as we considered last week, Micaiah warned Ahab not to go to war with Syria, that it would be fatal for him if he did so, that the nation would be left leaderless. And yet Ahab, when Ahab heard that, his attitude should have been one of gratitude. Thank you, God, for warning me. Thank you, God, for sending your man and letting me know that if I do this, I'm going to die. You saved my life. That wasn't his attitude. He should have been delighted that the man of God would tell him the truth and spare his life. You can be driving down the road and you see a bridge out ahead sign, and you can just ignore it because you think you know better. You can keep driving only to find out that warning wasn't trying to restrict you, it was trying to protect you. And God sent Micaiah to tell Ahab the truth, not because he was trying to restrict Ahab, he was trying to protect Ahab, but Ahab wouldn't listen. God's warnings are not meant to rob us, folks. They are meant to rescue us. This is what I just preached on Sunday morning. A very somber and direct message on conviction. That was not meant to offend anybody here. That was meant to rescue people here. That was not to restrict people, that was meant to rescue them. Instead, we see the actions, though, of not gratitude, but of a very determined sinner. Knowing full well that he was warned, Ahab determines, I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. Before we pick up a stone and sling it at Ahab, how often do we do that? We know God says don't, and yet knowing God says don't, we just go ahead and do it anyway. God says don't, and or this is going to happen, and knowing even the consequences, we just go ahead and do it anyway. We think we can live any way we want and not deal with the consequences. Notice some things here about this determined sinner. I want you to see, first of all, the condition of sin. Micaiah says, if. And really, sin is a choice. It's a condition. If Ahab lives, then God was wrong. If Ahab dies, then God was right. And really, all sin comes down to that question, doesn't it? We either believe God or we don't. If Adam and Eve really believed God, they wouldn't have took of that fruit. And that's what it all comes down to, is we either believe God or we don't. This is the condition that every person has got to evaluate when it comes to sin. Do you believe God or do you believe yourself? Because we're really good at telling ourselves what we want to hear. We're really good at telling ourselves lies. And we can convince ourselves that's not really what God said, or that's not really what God meant, or that's not how it's all going to happen. Thanks for the warning, but I'll figure it out. I know better than God, and I can get out of what God says is going to happen. Do you believe God or the multitude of voices in your echo chamber? Men, society, the world has their own standard for sin. They tell you, the world and society, they say, well, that's not so bad. When God says, yeah, it's bad, who are we going to believe? That's the condition. Micaiah says, if God has spoken, then you're not coming back in peace. You're not coming back at all. If God didn't speak, then you'll come back. Notice we also need to consider the consequences of sin. If thou return at all in peace, then the Lord hath not spoken by me. If Ahab ignored God and did what God told him not to do, there would be a price to pay. Micaiah says, if God has spoken, then your refusal to obey God and avoid sin is going to cost you some things. Notice the consequences that Micaiah mentions. You can see them right there. And it's the same consequences that you and I deal with. When we sin, it will always cost us at least two things. It'll always cost us peace, and it will cost us our life. That's what it's going to cost. Again, go back to Adam and Eve in the garden and their sin. Before that moment, before that sin, they had never felt fear. They had never experienced anxiety. They had never worried about anything. And all of a sudden, as soon as they sinned, they were fearful and hid. They were experiencing a new emotion that nobody likes. They were thinking things that they had never thought before. They had dread. They had anxiety. They had worry. They had fear. All of that is pointing to the sign, as a big sign, that they had totally lost their peace. And what a terrible thing to lose. If you've ever struggled with anxiety or fear or worry, It's an absence of peace, and it's a terrible place to be. And you realize how precious and how important peace is. When I was struggling last year with all those things and dealing with that anxiety, I really come to appreciate how much peace means in your life. And sin will take that from you. It always will. It always does. Before sin, Adam and Eve ran to God. Now they ran from God. Sin didn't just change their condition, it changed their direction. It also is going to cost life. Sin's wages, the Bible makes clear in Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. That's the payment. That's the price. That's the cost. That's the wages of sin is death. And this is what Ahab must consider. Do I believe that what God says is wrong is wrong? And if so, am I willing to pay the price for disobeying God? But our flesh is fallen and it is stubborn. And so notice, thirdly, the consent to sin. Knowing it was God who said this, knowing it's going to cost him his peace and his life, Ahab decides, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up to Ramoth Gilead. I'll get to Ahab more in a moment, but first I gotta talk about Jehoshaphat. He wouldn't go to war until they consulted a man of God. He wanted to make sure God was involved in this thing, that God was okay with it, that God was endorsing. He recognized very quickly that Ahab's 400 prophets were just an echo chamber, just a bunch of yes men who were willing to tell Ahab anything he wanted to hear. And so he waits until Micaiah comes, and they ask Micaiah, and Micaiah tells him exactly what's going to happen, and yet he goes along with it anyway. I thought Jehoshaphat said he wouldn't go to war without first consulting a man of God, a prophet, and yet he consults him and goes ahead and does what he says not to do. I read that and I think about that. Remember a few chapters ago when Elijah was running from Jezebel and was in that cave, and God came to him and said, "What doest thou here, Elijah? What are you doing here?" I can almost in my mind's ear hear God saying the same thing to Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat was a godly man. He feared God. He loved God. He was one of Judah's better kings. And yet he made a terrible choice in picking Ahab as a friend. And I can almost hear that night, after Micaiah has spoken, Jehoshaphat's laying in bed. I'm sure God is whispering to him the same thing that he did with Elijah and saying, "What are you doing here, Jehoshaphat? Did you not hear just what my man said? My messenger just said, if you go into this war, you're going to die. What are you doing? What are you doing here?" And I wonder how many times we've heard that. Oh, I've certainly heard it. I've put myself in places and in positions and in situations where God would come along and His Spirit come along and say, "Hey, what are you doing here? Why are you here? How did you get here? How did you get to this position?" We'll see more about Jehoshaphat in a moment. But I want to say, to me, when I look at Jehoshaphat, he was dumb and getting dumber by the minute. a passenger gets into the car with a drunk driver, he may not be the one driving, but he still ends up in the same crash. Hey, when you decide to associate and link yourself with somebody doing wrong, you're going to absolve some of the consequences. Young people, when whom you associate with is going to play a big difference in your life. You know there's people in jail because of who they associated with. I don't know if you know this or not, but you don't actually have to commit a crime to be convicted of a crime. If you are with somebody who commits a crime, when they commit that crime, you can be charged with the same crime they did and be convicted of it and go to prison just like they will. You're in the car with somebody who goes to the store and robs the store, they're going to charge you with theft just like they will him. Your associations matter. Be careful who you associate with. It's going to cost Jehoshaphat a great deal of peace in his life because of who he associated with. As for Ahab, he hears Micaiah's advice. He rejects Micaiah's warning and decides to go to war anyway. In fact, if we're truthful about it, if we're honest about it, it didn't matter if God sent 500 prophets. Ahab was going to do this anyway. It wouldn't have mattered if God himself had come down and talked face to face with Ahab and told him not to go. Ahab was going to do it anyway. It wouldn't have mattered if he sent an angel. It wouldn't have mattered. No matter what, he had already determined what he was going to do. And that's just the disingenuous way that many people pray. They pray to God already decided what they're going to do. Don't ask God's opinion if you've already made up your mind. By the way, don't ask your pastor that either. Nothing frustrates me and discourages me more than people come to me and say, Pastor, I got a mess. I need advice. I need counsel. Then you show them counsel from God's Word, and they just go ahead and ignore it and do what they want to do anyway. And Ahab was like that. And we're like that sometimes. He was determined to go to war, just as men are determined to sin. And sometimes we're just as determined to sin. This was not a mistake. This was not a, oops, I messed up. This was a deliberate, defiant, determined sin. Now, why would anybody do that knowing the consequences of it? Why would we gossip, divide, criticize, cause problems amongst God's people knowing that it displeases God and comes with severe consequences? Why would we deliberately and intentionally do things that we know agitates and aggravates God and know that are sin? You say, why would we do that? Why do we do that? Can I tell you why? We do that because we're like Ahab. We believe we can outmaneuver God's judgment. That somehow we can defy God and escape the consequences. It won't happen to me, said everybody that it happened to. Right? And if that's your mindset, you're going to get caught up in it too. Sin is not just rebellion, it's an irrational confidence that we can escape consequences. And that's exactly what Ahab was thinking, and his actions prove it. He thought he was concealed. What was concealed was also hidden. But he failed to remember the lesson of Adam and Eve. Remember, they tried the same thing. They tried to conceal their sin with fig leaves. And it wasn't any more hidden than Ahab's sin is going to be. So we see a determined sinner, but we also see a determined sinner always develops a deceptive strategy. That's what we see. Secondly, look at verse number 30. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into battle, but put thou on thy robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now, let me spell this out for you. Ahab says, I know they want me. They want to kill me. And so I'm going to dress as just an ordinary soldier. I'm just going to blend in with the crowd. I'm just going to mix in with all the other soldiers. But Jehoshaphat, what you should do is you should dress up like a king. You should wear your royal robe. You should wear your royal crown. You should dress up just like a king would dress. Notice a couple of things about this. I got comments about Jehoshaphat in a moment. Notice the disguised soldier. In ancient times, actors wore masks to play roles, but no matter the mask, their real identity was known backstage. You can fool the audience, but you can't fool the director. And Ahab's plan is, I know God says I'm going to die, but I'm just going to blend in and he can't find me. I'm just going to mix in amongst the commoners, and he won't be able to find me. Just another chariot soldier amongst many. Ahab was attempting to avoid recognition, just be one of the guys. And it's the same attitude a lot of Christians have today. They want to fit in with the world, blend in with the culture, and disguise and hide their faith. This just happened this week. This week, a guy I never really knew before, never heard of before, but a young man we need to pray for right now tonight. I want you to go home tonight and I want you to pray for this young man. His name is Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey, up until yesterday, played basketball in the NBA with the Chicago Bulls. Until he was released this week, not because he was out beating up women or sleeping around, or not because he was immoral. Jaden Ivey is a new Christian. He's a new believer. And he's been posting a lot of very strong Christian stuff on his social media, including stuff against homosexuality and stuff against celebrating Pride Month that the Bulls do every year. And because of that, the Chicago Bulls released him yesterday and said his conduct is detrimental to the team. Just because he dared voice the views of the Bible. His unwillingness to blend in has cost him. And we ought to pray some things for this young man. He's a national example right now. Every eye is on him. And this is what I want you to pray to God. I want you to pray to God that he doesn't back down. Because there is going to be great pressure on him to capitulate, to compromise, to back down. I want you to pray that he does not get discouraged, that God keeps him encouraged. I want you to pray that some bold owner of some other team will say, the Bulls may not want that kind of player on their team, but that's exactly the kind of man of character that I want to play for my team, and will go ahead and hire him and make them a part of his team anyway. I want you to pray those things. Because I want God to get glory from this. It's not about Jaden Ivey. It's about God. It's about God working in a young man's life who says, I don't want to follow the crowd. I don't want to follow the rest of my teammates. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to go the way of the world. I want to be different. I want to live for God. I want to be a Christ-like Christian no matter where I am, knowing it may cost him. Because we can see in today's society why it's so tempting to blend in. Keep your mouth shut and just go along. And some have that philosophy that, oh, you've got to be like the world to reach the world. That is a recipe for failure. That never changes anybody. I'm a new coffee drinker. I have about that much coffee, about that much milk, and about that much cream. No, honestly, I have learned to increase the coffee dosages. I get Walmart or Target's caramel coffee. It's like candy. But in the afternoon, I'm drinking decaf, and it's unflavored. And it tastes like dirt to me. And I don't pour a glass of that and say, this tastes like dirt. I think I'll just add some more of it. No, I know that if I want to change the contents of that, I got to add something different to it, not more of the same. The philosophy of Christianity today that says, oh, we got to be like the world to reach the world, that's the illogical logic that I was just speaking of. It's saying, oh, we got to be like the world to change the world. That will never work. That's like adding more black coffee to your coffee cup to change the taste of it. It doesn't work. Got to be different. We have too many Ahabs who are willing and wanting just to blend in with everybody else. We need some more Jaden Ivies who say, I will not blend in. I won't do it even if it costs me. Because you can try and blend in, but I can guarantee you this, Christian, God sees you. You cannot hide from God. Ahab thought that disguising himself meant that he could sin, he could rebel against God, he could defy God and get by with it. It's the same mindset of a lot of people today. And why do you think so much sin happens under the cover of darkness? Because they think that it's concealed, but it's not concealed. It's not concealed from God at all. He sees. Notice the disguised soldier, and then notice the dense sovereign. I started to say dumb, but I knew Don would get on to me if I said dumb. But it is pretty dumb. I mean, you're pretty dense. You're not the sharpest tool in the toolbox. When the guy that has a target on him says, hey, you know what would be great? When we go into battle, if I could take this target off my back and put it onto your back, this would really confuse people. And you hear that and say, wow, that is a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Let me make myself a target. Because that's exactly what Jehoshaphat did. I mean, it's humorous, but it's true. He's not being very bright here. Ahab knew that God said if he goes to war, he'll die. Not only disguises himself, he convinces Jehoshaphat to put on his royal clothes, to put his target on his back. And worse, Jehoshaphat goes along with it. Jehoshaphat wasn't just being a good friend. He was being a human shield. He let Ahab put a target on his back and called it an alliance. And we do the same thing when we let the world dress us up in its values and then wonder why we feel the fire. Others may be determined to sin, but how dense are we when we agree to go along with it? Just because somebody else wants to destroy their life doesn't mean I have to participate. Just because somebody else wants to do wrong doesn't mean I have to agree to go with them. Because I've already said, how many young gang members are sitting in prison right now because they agreed to go along with some numbskull leader and take their heat and do their dirty work and then pay the price for it. That's exactly what Jehoshaphat's doing. Ahab's determined sin compelled the creation of a deceptive strategy. And with every deceptive strategy, I want to say lastly tonight, it eventually leads to a deadly sequence. This deceptive strategy is going to prove to be both dangerous and deadly. Because look at the plan of the enemy. It's a pretty solid plan. Look at verse number 31. But the king of Syria commanded his 32 captains that had rule over his chariots, saying, fight neither with small nor great, save only with the king of Israel. Here's what he's saying. Guys, don't piddle. Don't mess with. Don't be concerned with the little guys. Don't waste your effort and time and energy on the inconsequential people. Aim for the head. Attack the head. Cut the head off the snake and the snake will die. And so that's the plan. It's a common tactic used in combat. Our president has used that same strategy twice this year already. Take out the leader of Venezuela, Venezuela will fall. Take out the leaders of Iran, and then the next one that they elect, and then the next one that they elect, and eventually they'll capitulate. Of course, that's the strategy. It always doesn't play out that way. But that's the strategy. That's the plan. And here comes Patsy Dupe Jehoshaphat riding into battle. Hey, I'm the leader. Over here, guys. I'm the king. Kill me. Target firmly, I say, and willingly on his own back. It was a solid plan on Ahab's behalf. And it looked as if Ahab was going to thwart God and avoid death. Notice the perception of the enemy, verse number 32. And it came to pass when the captain of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat that they said, surely it is the king of Israel. And they turned aside to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out. Yeah. I wonder if at that moment he said, this was pretty dumb. I wonder if he did. I mean, man, I was foolish. God gave him the scare of his life. It's a wonder he didn't die. Verse number 33, and it came to pass when the captain of his chariots perceived that it was not the king of Israel, that they turned back from pursuing him. That's just really God's grace. Because Jehoshaphat has done nothing to deserve it. He's made foolish decision after foolish decision and put himself in a very dangerous place. But God allowed these men to recognize, oh, that's not the king of Israel. It's just somebody dressed up like him. And you can fool people for a while, but eventually people will see you for who you really are, good or bad. And though Jehoshaphat was wearing Ahab's clothing, the enemy soon recognized that the man they were chasing was not Ahab. But what a scare it must have put in Jehoshaphat. He came dangerously close to death because of his association with Ahab. And again, that's a powerful reminder we need to be careful about our associations. They can bring either good or bad into our lives. Nearness not only equals likeness, but nearness also brings us into the circle of consequences of other people's actions. Let me say, you need to be aware of attendance and closeness, not just because of the danger of association, but also because of endorsement. See, when you associate with somebody, you're endorsing what they do. We need to be very cautious and careful about our associations because we don't want to endorse wrong things. We don't want to let others think that we're okay with their sin when I'm not. And you shouldn't be either. Though Micaiah's warning had been directed at Ahab, Jehoshaphat's agreement to go to war was basically an endorsement to Ahab's rebellion. I mean, he heard Micaiah. And he heard Ahab said, I'm going to war anyway. And so Jehoshaphat agreeing to do that is basically rubber stamping Ahab's defiance and rebellion against God. And friend, don't you realize that when you go along with others in their rebellion and their defiance, you're endorsing it. You may not do it, but you're at least endorsing it. You're saying it's okay. And in this instant, it almost cost Jehoshaphat his life. Lastly, look at the providence and the enemy. The providence and the enemy. Verse number 34. And a certain man drew a bow at venture and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the harness. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, Turn thine hand and carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. And the battle increased that day, and the king was stayed up in the chariot against the Syrians and died at even. And the blood ran out of the wound into the midst of the chariot. And there went out a proclamation throughout the host about the going down of the sun, saying, Every man to his city and every man to his country. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. And one washed the chariot in the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood. And they washed his armor according unto the word of the Lord, which he spake. You can run from God, but you can't hide. You can attempt to cover your sin, but what you cover is not hidden from God. You defy God, you rebel against God, you sin against God, you're going to find God has an arrow with your name on it. It's the arrow of God's judgment. You know, a guided missile doesn't wander, it's locked onto a target. And what looked like random to man was regulated by God. It's just like that rock David slung. What chance did a little shepherd boy with a sling and a stone have? At slinging a stone and casting it and hitting just the right spot. Well, when you got a divine missile system behind you, you got a pretty good chance. See, there are no stray arrows in the will of God. You cannot outrun or hide from the providence of God. Notice there in verse number 34 that the arrow struck between the joints of the harness. Ahab thought, I'm protected. I'm secure. But God knows our weak points. The rich use their wealth as an armor. They think my wealth protects me. It absolves me from all evil and all wrongdoing that can come from me. Even, oftentimes in this world, let's be honest, it even protects them from justice. They can do wrong, they can break laws, they can commit sins, they can commit atrocities, but because they're wealthy and because they're powerful, they get by with it. But God knows their weakness. You know, all God has to do to any one of us is raise the oxygen 1 inch above our nose. And just 1 inch above our nose, we'll be dead in a few moments. All God has to do is the same thing He did to the storm, He can do to our heart. He can just say, peace, be still. And the heart stops beating. Steve Jobs' wealth didn't protect him from cancer. And wealth won't protect Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or any of these other guys either. God knows our weaknesses. He knows where to get us. He knows just where to hit us. And what a picture of the flaws and the cracks in our self-made defenses. We spend our lives building armor of wealth and health and people. Nothing wrong with working out. I'm trying to lose some pounds and we're watching more what we're eating and exercising. Nothing wrong with that, but some people worship that. And they think, I've got to eat right because I've got to protect my health so I can live a long life. You can do all that and still die young. That doesn't protect you. Exercise and good eating doesn't protect you from death. Some try and hide their true selves or their vulnerabilities because of insecurity. But God exposes the cracks. He knows when and where and how to bring judgment. And God's judgment happened just like God said it would. Remember when Ahab and Jezebel killed Naboth and took his vineyard? And Jezebel set him up to be slaughtered? God told Ahab there in that vineyard, hey, the same place where they washed Naboth's blood, the dogs are going to lick your blood up. And now it's all coming to pass, just like God said it would. So you can run, but you can't hide. What you conceal is not hidden from God. You say, is that the end for Ahab? On this earth. But sadly, he left this world in the test of battle and entered into eternity in the torments of hell. It didn't get better for him, it got worse. And look at verse number 39. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did and the ivory house which he made and all the cities that are built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? We don't have these books, but God has the records. God keeps records, and He has such a record on every one of us. And these records are going to be brought out for Ahab on that great judgment day ahead. Listen to this, I'm done. Proverbs 28:13. Proverbs 28:13. He that covereth his sins shall not prosper. But whoso confesseth and forsaketh them shall have mercy. You know what that verse is saying? I heard this a long time ago. I forget even who I heard say it. What that verse is saying is simply this. If you try and cover your sins, God's going to uncover them. Whoso covereth sins shall not prosper. But if I instead will uncover them by confessing them to God, God says, I'll cover them because I'll remove them as far away from you as the east is from the west. You say, Pastor, if I'm a Christian and you believe that once saved, always saved doctrine, why, as a Christian, should I pray and confess my sins? That's why. It won't matter whether you go to heaven or hell or not. That's already been determined. But it sure makes a difference in the consequences. And if I try and cover my sin, God says, you're not going to prosper. You're not going to succeed. I'm going to uncover those. I'm going to expose you. He says, but if you'll confess them and forsake them, you'll find I'm a God of mercy. I'm a God who's willing to help those that are willing to do that. It's our choice. Let's be honest with God and don't fall into the trap of thinking that we can defy God, that we can disobey God, that we can willfully sin and conceal our sin and get by with it. You can run, but you can't hide from God. Heads bowed, eyes closed. Don's coming to the piano. Maybe tonight you're sitting there and you say, Pastor, boy, I sure needed that reminder tonight. Pastor, I sure needed